So my name is Villu. I'm a co-founder at a company called Funderbeam, which is building the world's startup marketplace powered by the blockchain. And I guess I'm here to tell the story of Funderbeam, how we got to where we are. Maybe you can recognize yourself in the process. Maybe you can laugh a little bit. And I sure hope that you like what we're doing, because I'm going to be starting out with that. So that if you haven't heard about Funderbeam and what we're trying to achieve, then you'll find out. And then the rest of it will make more sense. And perhaps what we're doing will also somehow factor itself into your lives. But so this year, about $100 billion will have been invested in startups worldwide. Now, how many of those investments can be traded, bought or sold online? None that I know of. Because there is no liquidity. How many of you have some sort of equity in a startup, or are looking to get some or to invest in some? Right, a fair amount. So liquidity is a big deal. But the problem is there is no liquidity when it comes to startup investing, because investments don't flow like water. It does not work like NASDAQ. Startup deals take weeks or months to set up. And when they do happen, most investors, most angels, most VCs, they sit on their investments for years. Depending on the sector, it can run from 3, 4 to 7 to 10 years, sometimes even, which is a long time, because there is no other option. There is no liquidity. Well, we asked the question, is that the best that humankind can do? Or can this situation be improved? Because obviously when you look at investing as we've seen on Bloomberg TV and the little news crawl on CNN and everything, on public markets, you can trade stuff, right? Which is pretty natural. You think you can buy something, you want to buy something, then you go ahead and do. And if you want to offload an investment, you do. So anyway, with startups, not possible. So this is what we're trying to do to fix that. We are a couple of months away from launching the beta version of a startup marketplace, which is worldwide and uses the blockchain. We'll get a little bit deeper into the detail as well. But in order for this to happen, we decided that 3 things need to be done. And all angles have been attacked in a way by other people, but they've never been combined, and the blockchain aspect, as far as we know, also has not been included. So what we're doing is we're combining startup data, company research. We're adding to that syndicated investing so that you can put money into startup investments. And we're adding the big deal, which is online trading. So you get on-demand liquidity through trading your investments online. I'm going to take a quick look through. This is something that you may already be familiar with if you know what Funderbeam is about, because earlier this year we launched a startup intelligence product, also an investor intelligence product. So we have about 150,000 startups in the database today, about 20,000 investors. And obviously, you've all heard of Crunchbase and AngelList and some of the free databases. Maybe if you're more advanced, you may have run into names like Mattermark, DataFox, CB Insights. The guys that are usually associated with startup research and quarterly funding reports and analytics on that front. So what we did was we took raw data that's available to most, and then we tried to clean it up. Because the one giant problem with startup information when it comes to investing and also competitive research and any kind of analyst work is that these are really, really early stage companies. And as you know, early stage companies are not very transparent, right? They have no legal requirement to disclose a whole lot. yeah, we do file our annual reports every once in a while, but that information is limited, and it's also rather old once we get to it. So yes, we know early stage companies will forever be less transparent than companies that have gone through IPOs, but we figured, okay, so what can we do about this? If we know information A and information D, perhaps there is a way to kind of triangulate B and C using some models that apply to various industries and various types of startups, looking at the past history of thousands of startups and how they grew and developed. So this is what we're trying to do with the data product, which is live today. We used to like using the term X-raying startups, and we still do, because it's a nice little metaphor. You take a company and you go to a machine. In this case, it's called Funderbeam, and then you take a snapshot, and boom, you can see all their guts and stuff inside. So we try to make companies more transparent, because that's also something that any one of us would expect when you get into investing, putting your actual money on a marketplace. So this is what we have done. This particular example is TransferWise, which is a name that I think everyone here in Estonia knows, an international payments company started by a couple of Estonian guys. So here's just a quick snapshot of the kind of stuff that's available there. And this is live today. The one thing about this that makes us, I think, pretty cool is that we're really cheap. We're not free, but we're really damn cheap. 12 euros a month compared to, let's say, 400 or 500 of some of our competitors. So that's pretty cool. That's a nice little start. And yeah, so that's one component. The other component is stuff I talked about a little bit earlier, which is syndicated investing, right? So what happens here is kind of like AngelList, right? So a lead investor starts a syndicate, decides that he wants to invest in a certain startup. So he starts a syndicate. Backing investors can join that syndicate. The money is put together, and then that syndicate invests in a startup. Now, what happens there is that you actually, as an investor, don't get startup equity. The syndicate gets that equity. The syndicate is just a separate company, like between you and the startup that is being invested in. But in return for your the money that you put in the syndicate, you get digital tokens. And this is the cool part, because these tokens are essentially tiny slivers of Bitcoin or colored coins, because we're working with a company called ChromaWay, which was one of the or actually the pioneer behind colored coins, which is basically Bitcoin with additional information added to it, which is suitable for digital asset trading, such as startup investments. So you as an investor get these digital tokens in return. They have these tokens have information that prove your relationship with the syndicate, the underlying investment behind it. And lo and behold, the really cool part is that these tokens can be traded. So you don't have to mess with trying to trade equity, because that's really tricky. It takes a long time, a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of accountants, a lot of lawyers in the process, really expensive. Try to do it cross-border, forget about it. It's really tough. But with tokens, that's really cool. That's really easy. So you can trade these tokens, which are worthless on their own. The value comes from the information that's attached to it. You can trade these within an investment syndicate or across syndicates or on the open market that we're soon launching. So everything that you own and every transaction here is being recorded on the blockchain, the worldwide ledger, the distributed network of trust that's being hyped quite a bit these days. So that's the cool part. So thanks to this, you will have on-demand liquidity, something that's currently not available to early-stage investing. You will have regulatory compliance also built into this, because a lot of people ask, so yeah, but if you can do this, is it legal? Yes, it is. The way that we've set up these syndicates today, they fall under specific certain exceptions under EU law. just to try things out. We're proving our point. We're also working with the Estonian Financial Services Authority, and I think also the UK guys, because the official headquarters of Funderbeam is actually located in London. And over time, we'll be adding various different structures to the syndicates, including microfunds and other options. But that's detail that doesn't really matter today. The things that does matter is that all of a sudden it will become possible to trade startup investing. So you can actually spread your risks. You can get access to more deals. Try to get access to TransferWise's next round as a regular guy. You can't really. I mean, TransferWise is worth what, somewhere between 750 and maybe more than $1 billion today. So it's pretty much out of reach anyway. But if you want to put, let's say, 1,000 euros or 10,000 euros into a company today, that's a little further down the road than the first few months. It's pretty tricky, because if you want to try to raise 500,000 or $1 million as a company, you don't really care too much about very, very small investors anymore. I mean, you care in your heart, but you don't want to deal with them because it's really, messy. So thanks to syndicate investing or syndicated investing, you do get access to better deals, because the lead investor in a syndicate takes all the initiative, all the responsibility. As a backer, you can just kind of sit there and say, okay, so here's my money, do something cool with it. I trust you. So the lead investor does all that, opens the doors, gets the deal, the shareholders agreement with the startup, and you can just ride along. And at any time, you can get out of the investment if you want to, which, again, is something you cannot do today. So we like that, and investors do too. Not that they necessarily always want to exit really, really soon. We all kind of want to exit, when the magical unicorn situation happens and everyone becomes a millionaire, a dozen times over. But, one real life example, let's just use that TransferWise example just for the heck of it. What if you got into TransferWise really early in their life? You put in 20,000 euros. So a year and a half goes by, the company's now worth tens, probably hundreds of millions. And for some reason, let's say that they used Funderbeam to raise that initial funding. So now you're sitting on those tokens and you're like, okay, so in return for those, in return for my investment, I got, let's say, 5% of TransferWise. At that time, it wasn't really worth much because the concept hadn't been proven yet. There was really no functioning website, none of that. And do forgive me, David and Kristo, that I'm using you as an example here. It has nothing to do with real life. So a year and a half passes, and now the company's worth quite a bit. And you're like, on paper, I'm worth a lot of money because I, at some point, owned 5% of the company. It's become smaller now due to dilution and further investment rounds, but it's worth more. So there's also a divorce thing going on, and I need to pay and all of that stuff. And I'd really like to offload like 0.5%. Of my investment, because that's worth quite a bit of money now. So in the future, very, very soon, you will be able to. Today, not so much. Right. Here's a little example of what stuff will look like for an investor or, a Funderbeam user a couple of months from now. The investment dashboard, where you have an overview of your syndicates, your balance of digital tokens, which kinds of investments you've applied for, which ones you've made. So a nice little overview of where your startup money has gone. And this is a mock-up of a syndicate that is looking for cash or has looked for cash or something like that. Right, so pretty neat, we think. So do we know what we're doing? On most days, we think, kind of, maybe. Unlike someone mentioned the kind of hairy stereotype of startups being mostly run and founded by young people with zits out of college. Ours is not. We may still get the occasional zit, but we're not just barely out of college. I think I'm not sure what the average age is, but in the executive team, we have a CTO who is in his mid-40s. We have a CEO who is approaching 40 fast. I'm 40. One of our co-founders, Urmas Baker, who used to be the head of compliance at LHV Bank, is also approaching 40. He is also the guy, I think we mentioned here, that he's supervised financial markets. So yeah, one of our co-founders used to work at the Estonian FSA. He used to work for EBRD, for Morgan Stanley. So a pretty serious legal and financial background. And our main founder and CEO, Kaidi Ruusalep, whose name you may have heard here or there, used to run the Nasdaq OMX stock exchange here in Estonia. So this kind of starts making sense now. It's like, oh, okay, so you have people with that kind of background. So obviously when they look at startups, they're thinking markets, trading, exchange, all of that stuff. But now, as opposed to someone who might be 23 and really enthusiastic, technologically smart, there's also that weird little thing called experience. Statistics supposedly show that startup founders who are a little bit more advanced in age, approaching middle age, anything below 60, are more successful in keeping their company afloat and making it work. I don't know. I guess maybe that's just an excuse because we look at each other's wrinkly faces and we get kind of defensive. And with this team, actually we have about 13 full-timers right now and a couple of students who help us with data and analytics and that kind of stuff. We've raised about $2 million, 1.75 million euros in the past 2.5 years. The most recent round we just had a couple of months ago, I think. So not too shabby, but because the marketplace is about to launch in beta around the turn of the year, we really need to spread our wings in the spring, hire a lot of people, get in front of our potential customers, attract leads, attract backers, attract startups who believe in this kind of stuff. And so we're looking for a Series A funding at sometime next spring, several million euros. And yeah, if you know anyone who's good at this kind of stuff, let me know because we'll need them, right? Now, how on earth did we get here? I mean, this was kind of a semi-prepared thing that I've diluted from my pitch, and I apologize for being really very Funderbeam product centric right now. But I thought maybe it's interesting. Now, the path here has been kind of winding, not a very straight road. Because you learn, you try things, and you run into a brick wall, and then you try to get around it or dig under it. So when we started out, I think the first discussions, the really early discussions, were about, I think Kaidi had some idea about educating young kids when it comes to finance. I think we were sitting at a restaurant in the Old Town talking about that, and just with me, that didn't really click very much because I'm not a very smart guy. I used to work in PR for Skype, and I ran Hill & Knowlton in Estonia. So I'm what in Estonian people call humanitar, right? So I don't get stuff very soon. I need to simplify it. But these conversations kept on going, and then we started hitting on, okay, so data is really cool. Startups don't have a lot of data on them. Or when they do, it's noisy and foggy and wrong. We went to Crunchbase and performed a search for a specific industry, and I think we got a school in Hiiumaa as one of the results. So we're like, okay, so that doesn't look good. Their source data is really bad, and everyone struggles in this industry. Everyone struggles with dirty data. And then we happened upon what we thought at the time a really wonderful idea. Let's go to startup pitching contests. where very early teams, let's say Garage 48, for example, or perhaps a little more advanced, Latitude 59 or Slush or any, that kind of stuff. Let's go to those events and let's provide the audience, the crowd, an opportunity to provide feedback for or on those startups that they see pitching. Because the assumption was, and it still holds true, even though we kind of moved away from that idea, and I'll explain in a second. The assumption that we had back then, which still holds true, is that usually you've been to pitch contests, right? You've seen yourself or your CEO pitch, and other companies. Usually you get, let's say, 4 to 6 jury members who come in and they look all experienced and proud, and everyone kind of buzzes around them. It's like, please listen to my pitch. I have a wonderful company. So they come in and they react. Sometimes they give good advice, sometimes they suck, sometimes they conflict with each other. And if you're a startupper, what do? How do you actually live your life with conflicting advice by supposedly really, really experienced people? And yet at the same time, you have a room full of people in the back who have all been in the field. They know what they're doing, and there are dozens, sometimes hundreds or thousands of them. But they're silent. The crowd is kind of locked out of that discussion. So we're like, okay, let's build an app that helps the audience provide what we call crowd back or crowd feedback, because that would perhaps be much more useful to a very young startup, more so perhaps than 4 or 5 egomaniacs who are on the jury. I'm being really rough on jury members. They're usually not that bad, but they are rough. What we found after spending months on this, we built, I think, a web app on HTML5. We went to Latitude 59 in 2014, I believe, and it was a disaster. The app didn't work very well. It was kind of ugly, and I think it also got hacked right there and then by a guy who now works for us. His name is Kirill. I don't remember all the details, but I think that's kind of what he did. So the app became unusable. But what we found as a result of trying to pitch this product to dozens and dozens of various conferences and pitch events worldwide was that it's really hard to get in, and we were spending lots of money and lots of time on just winning one event that would be willing to sign on. So we're like, this is not gonna, we're not gonna last like this. So the plan all along was to use that app as kind of a data pipe on very early stage companies where we would get access to their early stage numbers, and we could feed that into our big data analytics project. And we're like, no, this is not going to work. We were naive. We just burned through a few, dozen thousand euros. Yeah, that's not very good. So we killed that app. I think it was called Pitchcraft, which I think was a wonderful name. But 15 years ago, I wrote an article. I covered the Scandinavian VC industry back then as a journalist. And I really liked the words Pitchcraft. So it became the name of an app that didn't survive more than 3 months. So yay. So we moved on to stage 2, which was, okay, so it doesn't make sense to go out to each event and each company and ask for data themselves, because there are hundreds and thousands of companies out there. There's no way we can manage that. We would need to hire half of India to input all that data and to get it. So we hired some people who were smarter than us, and lo and behold, all of a sudden, all the data on AngelList and SimilarWeb and Crunchbase and LinkedIn became available to us through APIs. Pretty neat. So we pulled in lots and lots of data. We ran tons of research and analytics, and we tested all kinds of weird relationships between various events and variables. For example, we created something that we still use, which is called the, what's it called? The funding probability score, which is when you look at a startup and there is a percentage attached to it, which says maybe 45. So what does that mean? It means that we have found that this company corresponds to, or their structural characteristics correspond to other companies like them that in the past have at that point raised or not raised money, if they so desired. So I think we started out with 35 characteristics, and we only found out that about 8 of them were statistically meaningful, and some of them seemed extremely silly. I don't remember them all, but whether or not the company got funding had to do with whether they had, or how many Twitter followers they had, or how many people they had working for them, and very, very basic stuff. For whatever reason, our partners at Tartu University, one of whom was Kristjan Vassil, who is one of the greatest statisticians or data scientists in Estonia today, they proved that this percentage actually is valid in 75% of the cases. So it's much better than flipping a coin. So we started playing with that kind of stuff, and we started calculating companies' valuations, or basically estimating valuations, their burn rates, and one by one filling in some of those data gaps that when you do competitive research, or if you're looking for investments, potential investments as an investor, you would really appreciate. Because the problem is, if you're an angel here in Tallinn, an angel investor, in most cases you invest in other companies right here in Estonia, because your networks, your contacts, your connections are pretty much the same. You talk to the same people, you go to the Est-Ban meetings, you meet with other people like you, and they say, hey, have you heard about Fleep? There's this really wonderful, chat company here. They're pretty cool. You want to invest? Oh yeah, maybe I'll invest. But most people don't invest in companies who are in other countries because bad data. You need to talk to the founding teams themselves to find out, how's their traction, because there's no traction information available online in most cases, unless you're doing like mobile games or stuff like that, because that information is available for a lot of money. How many downloads, how much revenue, all of that stuff. So we've found that a lot of people appreciate, as they do their research, better information. So it's always a crapshoot. We have a lot of unhappy people because they come to us and say, well, I have this company in my portfolio and you claim that their valuation is 1.7 million. Well, that's just wrong. It's better. Other guys is like, oh yeah, I wish we were worth 10 million, which you say on your website. But even though a lot of those things are approximations, they're based on real life examples and models, which help you steer in the right direction if you do any kind of startup research. It may not get you there eventually, but if you start out with 3,000 companies and you need to get down to 30, that's a pretty cool tool. You can run I think 15 filters to look at companies with, at various stages of development and so on, how much money they've raised, how quick they've grown, all of that stuff. So it's pretty useful. But anyway, that's where we got from trying to build a crappy HTML5 web app. And some people say, okay, so now you're building the marketplace, you pivoted. No, we never did, because the information and analytics, the data is, the cornerstone, or one of the cornerstones when it comes to any marketplace on the planet. It's the thing that lubricates trading movement. You cannot trade if you don't know why I should. So it's just been a logical progression. Thank you. I didn't think that was that quotable. So have we made mistakes? Absolutely. We've spent a lot of money on stuff that we should have never spent money on. I'm sure that a lot of you can relate. At some point when we did not yet have too many people on the team, for example, on the design side, we contracted with several agencies, creative agencies, design agencies, whatever you want to call them, and that was really, really expensive as a result. I know they have a place in some cases. And, outsourcing some work to an agency makes a lot of sense when you know exactly what you need and when there is a great match. But what we found was that we paid through the nose for work that was slotted in between tons of other work. And there's just, at some point, things get so nuanced and detailed that there's no substitute for having a team member in-house right there from morning till night. It's not like something that an agency can do from 2 to 5 p.m. right after they've had a terrible meeting with a previous client and they're still reeling from that. So I think we made at least 2 versions of our analytics website with outside agencies, which we had to scrap. And the whole design logic and the design language got changed several times as we progressed. So eventually we smartened up and hired people in-house. We still do use a freelance designer as a kind of a senior dude who gives us direction on the overall design language. But he has his own business, he's serving other clients, and we don't actually need him all that time. Plus, it would be really, really expensive. So a kind of a mixture of approaches is what has worked for us. It may not be what works for you. The other problem that we're still struggling with is hiring the right people. For some reason, or getting the right people. For some reason, our founder and CEO, Gaidi, he's really, really good at talking people out of their current jobs. I don't know, but something in the way she speaks, she changes people's minds. And we have wonderful, wonderful folks in the team. Now, still, anyone who's paid attention to the Estonian startup ecosystem over the past 5 years or more knows that the cream of the crop already has a great, great job. Back at the time when I was working at Skype, Skype was one of the top attractions for developers. There were companies like Swedbank and some giant state-owned systems that provided enough of a challenge to really smart people. But our educational system just cannot provide enough people to satisfy all the needs among young companies such as ours. So, and that also touched us when we started looking for people who are really good at sales. And anyone who does not know how Estonia works, we're really crap at sales. We build great products, but we don't really know how to sell them very well or how to market them very well. So it's one of those kind of cliched stereotypes that we found are pretty true. So when we started out looking for salespeople to actually start scaling our kind of outreach effort, first we started looking at people inside Estonia. And let me tell you, we learned something pretty cool there. Just out of a 5-second idea that we had. It's like, okay, so we hear a lot about these international people, foreigners, who have fallen in love with an Estonian and have somehow ended up in Tallinn. So, and it seems like most of those people who come to Estonia seem to be guys. So what if some wonderful guys who had great jobs, dealing with dozens of different markets internationally, somehow ended up here because Kristi was an Estonian? And so, but how do we reach these guys? And something that really helped us was Facebook. There is a group called Expats in Tallinn or Expats in Estonia. I forget what their specific names are because some of them have kind of imploded and died because their participants thought that there was too much censorship in those chats. So some people started their own expat chats. But anyway, those are the places where expats who live in Estonia go to bitch and moan and to share their experiences about racism and all that kind of stuff, which is a great outlet for them. But it was a really, really wonderful hack for us, because we just posted a little bit there. It's like, hey, we're looking for, someone with international sales experience. Anyone want to, send me a message? And within like half an hour, I had 7 people contacting me. Some guy from Spain, some guy from the US and the UK and so on. And that was really neat. And we hired some of those guys. And then we learned a lesson. Because Estonians are not very great salespeople, we also get fooled by people who can bullshit a lot. So we ended up not working with some of those wonderful people after a little while, because they were great at talking the talk, but not so much walking the walk. Their resumes are really impressive. We can, all make them look beautiful. So, long story short, now we've been looking globally. There are people that we're talking to for sales and growth hacking, marketing positions from Brazil to the US, to Latvia, to Kazakhstan. Just because that very old, simple lesson that Skype learned when it was running its 400 or 500 member team here in Tallinn. It's like, when you're looking for the top of any skill, there are not that many people anywhere on the world. So it just does not make sense to look for accidental, foreigners or expats here in Estonia, but you do need to spread out and look around the world. So we started doing that, and surprisingly enough, you've all heard of a company called Jobatical, right? Karoli Hendriks. Not very old, that company, but in comparison to all the traditional startup job boards and all of those other platforms, Jobatical has actually provided us with the best flow of candidates. And I think we're getting very close to hiring a couple of those people that we found through there. So I initially had some reservations, thinking that maybe Jobatical is a place where, the surfer dudes and the kind of snowboarding types, they go to a foreign country for like 6 months to a year, and they get high and they go snowboard, and then they, pretend like they're working at the same time. But we found really, really cool people. Somebody with roots in Finland, who wants to get, who lives in the U.S. right now, but wants to get back to Europe. And there's this other person who, all of them are like, yeah, I'm actually willing to commit long term to Europe, and this looks like a wonderful opportunity. And I'm really surprised that it comes out of Estonia. But hey, I can live in a country where there's darkness for 6 months in a row. They don't know what they're talking about, but we're happy enough. So tiny little lessons like that, which I think a lot of you and your colleagues can relate to. But as a result, we have a team that's a mixture of humanitariid, like me, who needs things to be really, really simple because we don't understand complicated technology, and really hardcore science guys. People who are, have PhDs in computer science. They're really, wonderful at machine learning and writing algorithms, which I don't really know what they are, but they seem to do a great job. And out of this diversity and mixture of conflicting and overlapping skills, really, really wonderful things can happen. And perhaps one final thought is that it's the most wonderful feeling to see an idea start taking shape. That you, with your colleagues, you've pushed the button, go, and all of a sudden it seems to attract these people in orbit and attract them to your team, and this idea became an ugly app, and then it became a pretty website, and then bad data became good data, and this idea for a global marketplace, which was really, laughably ambitious and stupid, is actually becoming, real really soon. So, yeah, diversity, good. People like you around you, not so good, because you'll all be nodding along to each other. So that's, I think, what it takes to at least get to the verge of making it internationally. We'll talk about it, in a year or two, when we've hopefully reached a better place. But that's what we do. We're building the world's startup marketplace at Funderbeam. Thanks.